Hi, this is Antoine, writer and creator of The Peril of Haven. First, I'd like to thank those of you who've been listening consistently. It really is great to see. I'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, or just hello. So feel free to shoot me a message on our Instagram or the Facebook page. Those of you who are new to The Peril of Haven, welcome. Just make sure you go back and listen to the previous episodes. This episode does have our first content warning. This episode involves police overreach and brutality, so if that's something that is sensitive to you, just be aware and go forward in whatever way is best for your own health and safety. With all that being said, let's get weird. Episode 4, Marked, Part 1, Protect and Serve.
I'm hungover. I drank until I passed out in the hopes of a dreamless sleep. The effort was as wasted as I was. I sprawled across the bed, watching the room spin while my alcohol-soaked mind conjured images to remind me that there is no refuge for me. Not at the bottom of a bottle, nor in the oblivion that excess is supposed to grant. And so I dreamt. The first act was the smiles. Anything even vaguely face-shaped took on the malicious smiles that have been haunting me for the past week. The fire alarm above my head, the awful pattern on the carpet, even the sink faucet that I could see through the open bathroom door. All of them smiled at me. Next, the shadows congealed in every corner and vomited out countless pairs of white hands, grasping from endless arms with too many elbows. Lastly, the clothes that have been accumulating on my floor for the past several days got up, lurching toward me. I could feel them judging me for carelessly tossing them to the floor and leaving them to their own devices. When I thought it was over, I found myself in a dark hall, looking back at the horrors of the past few days, only to run forward into the shapeless new horrors that are sure to come. My sleep was not restful. Now I'm tired and hungover. I should call Cardia today, but first I need to get some air, find something greasy to eat, and take something for this headache. I'm almost relieved. Today, I was reminded that the world has perfectly normal ways to terrorize its inhabitants. While I was walking, admittedly a little unsteadily, I heard 2 quick pulses of a police siren. I stepped to the side, turning to see what I was getting out of the way of, when the police cruiser pulled over. "Where are you headed?" the officer asked me. He was a thin man with a slight pot belly and thinning hair. He had a friendly voice and a blank face. "To the diner," I said simply. "You're not looking too steady there, friend," he said. "You feeling okay?" "Honestly, no, officer. I overindulged a bit last night, and now I'm paying for it. I'm hoping something hot from Thornfoot's will help," I said tiredly. I just wanted to sit down. The longer I stood there, the brighter everything seemed to be, and the warmer and clammier my skin felt. "That's a real shame. I'll let you get on your way in just a moment. Got any ID on you?" "No, I don't, officer. I mean no disrespect, but As I said, I'm not feeling very well right now. Is there something I can help you with? Not at all, friend, the officer said with a smile. Saw you staggering a bit and just wanted to check in on you. His smile widened. I'm sure I'll be seeing you around. I turned to continue on my way when the words, "I matched a description," came to mind. The voice wasn't mine. It was almost like a memory. Possibly a friend? I spent the rest of the walk in contemplation. The meal at Thornfoot's diner was uneventful. The first few bites made me queasy, and I had to excuse myself to the restroom. After that, I felt a bit better and discovered that I was ravenous. It was then that I realized that I hadn't eaten since breakfast the day before. I was able to keep the rest of my meal down, and left Thornfoot practically a new person. I decided to take a walk through the park before heading home. The hope was to flush out any remaining alcohol in my body with some light physical activity. It was when I got to the park that I realized I had seen the same car pass me at least 3 times in the few blocks since the diner. The next time it passed, I looked more closely. The officer from earlier was following me. We made eye contact. He smiled and tipped his hat. Suddenly, home seemed like the best place to be. I definitely had a much better grasp of Haven than I had last week, but I didn't think it would be enough for me to lose a cop who was tailing me. I started walking in the general direction of home, looking for any opportunity I could to duck down an alley or circle back or whatever one does to shake a pursuer. When I was nearly home, I decided to take a right when I was meant to take a left. I was close to home and knew that there was a side street that I could use to circle back around once I saw the cop go down the wrong path. He took the bait, and I circled around feeling pleased with myself. As I came out of the side street, there he was, standing outside his car. "You lost?" he asked, his smile wider than when I had seen him last. "Your apartment building is that way," he said, pointing toward my building. He must have been following me since I left this morning. "No, officer, I'm still just a little out of it. I realized that I made a wrong turn and circled back," I said, trying to sound calm. "2 meetings in 1 day. You were right about seeing me around, I guess." The officer's smile widened. If he kept up at this pace, his head would split in 2. "Say, what's your name, friend?" he asked, with an air of obviously feigned innocence. "Demetrius," I replied shortly. "You can call me Deputy Howard, Demetrius." "You'd better head home, friend. Get some rest and try to avoid abandoned places like this," he said, gesturing vaguely down the side street. "Wouldn't want someone getting their hands on you." He chuckled and got back into his car. I just woke up a little while ago. If I'm honest, I didn't really want to go to sleep after Deputy Howard followed me around town. Setting aside the fact that he knew where I lived, the comment about avoiding abandoned places to prevent someone getting their hands on me struck a little too close to home about something that no one should know about. And if they did, they shouldn't believe it. While I didn't feel safe enough to sleep, I needed to shake off the last of the hangover. Having a deputy with an unhealthy knowledge of my comings and goings isn't the most frightening experience I've had in the past week. It seemed to me that there was a greater danger in having my mind and body in less than optimal condition than in sleeping for an hour or 2. I was mostly correct. I'm sitting at my window right now. There's a police cruiser outside of my building. There are 2 officers inside, though from this angle I can't tell much about them. I don't think either of them is Deputy Howard. Even from my less than ideal vantage point, they seem to embody strength and size. I don't have a view of the rear exit. I wonder if they're watching all of the doors, or if they know which apartment is mine and are keeping an eye on it. There's no one in the hall. I'm going to check the rear exit. They were at the rear exit. I decided to see if they would follow me, or if they were there only to passively observe. There's a convenience store about a mile from my apartment. I walked that way, and within a block it became apparent that there wasn't anything passive about their observation. The cruiser at the rear started to slowly come forward, while the other cruiser came around the corner. I kept an unhurried pace, pretending not to notice them. As I walked, they took turns following me and stopping. If I had had any intention of trying to shake them, it would have been nearly impossible with one of them having me in their sight at all times. I got to the convenience store, not wanting the police to see me leave empty-handed. I bought a lighter, a snack cake, a comb, and a travel-sized bottle of hairspray, all for roughly twice their actual value. Upon leaving the store, I noticed both cruisers parked out front. I ignored them and started back toward my apartment building. I should probably have stayed on the main streets, but I walked down a small alley. Halfway down, I noticed those maliciously smiling faces in every window that wasn't blocked by blinds or curtains. I paused for a moment and looked around. Every pair of curtains twitched shut, and each set of blinds closed at the same time. Needless to say, I knew that I was in trouble. I looked back, and a police cruiser was blocking the end of the street. The officers were walking toward me. I started to continue the way I had been going, but the other cruiser was blocking that end of the street with 2 more officers heading toward me. The first thing I noticed was that they were all nearly identical. They all had square jaws on pale, shapeless, boulder-like heads. They all wore aviator sunglasses, reflecting my wary face back at me with their opaque, oil-slick surfaces. The only difference between them was that one officer from each cruiser had hair worn in a tight bun on their head, while the other 2 were bald. All 4 of them had thick, muscular bodies. I couldn't help but notice that their hands were all heavily scarred and calloused, and that they looked twice the size of what I would expect to see on other people of their height and build. Each hand was clenched into a fist that I'm not sure they could unclench if they wanted to.
"What's in the bag?"
they asked, not quite in unison, creating a kind of reverberating effect. As expected, their voices were identical. What came as a surprise was the voice itself. It was that almost echoey, unisex squeak of a child who had just learned to talk. "Just some grooming supplies and a snack," I said, trying not to appear frantic as I looked for a possible escape or a possible weapon.
"You wouldn't mind if we took a look at the bag, would you?"
Again, they spoke not quite simultaneously. "Are you asking to search me?" Obviously they were. I wasn't really asking for an answer. I was trying to buy time before I was expected to approach one of them, or worse, before they decided to converge on me.
"That isn't the word we would use. We just want to take a look. We're the police. We're keeping you safe. You don't have anything to hide, do you?"
Strangely, I didn't feel safe. These people were obviously a threat to me. The thought of trying to fight them off was terrifying. Worse, if they were actually police, there would be some very real consequences if I tried to enforce my rights or defend myself. What do you do in a situation like this? I felt violated. There was no reason for them to search me. I could feel the aggression rolling off of them like a fog, blocking out everything else. I worried what would happen if I refused, even though I had every right to. I worried what excuse they might find even if I cooperated. I chose to comply, opening the bag and presenting the contents to them all without stepping any closer. As I said earlier, there was a comb, a travel-sized bottle of hairspray, and a snack cake. Nothing to give anyone pause.
Bring it to us,
Commanded the two furthest from the main street.
We're keeping the neighborhood safe. You understand.
Said the other two. I took a couple steps closer. Wordlessly, they beckoned me closer still. I took a few more steps, presenting the bag at arm's length. In perfect unison, they shouted,
Suspect is approaching threateningly.
I could hear booted steps running toward me as two pairs of huge, gnarled fists started pummeling me. I fell to the ground, the contents of my bag scattering as I felt the first kicks from behind. I tried crawling away.
Suspect is resisting!
The voices crowed delightedly. I made it to a nearby stoop and curled around a planter. Slowly, the footsteps advanced. I waited, and as the nearest officer approached, I swung the planter with all the force I could muster. It staggered back, and I ran for the hairspray. I turned and sprayed it in the nearest officer's face, shocked to find that when I had hit it, I knocked its aviators off. It didn't have eyes. The skin where the eyes should have been was twisted and knotted, pulled in tight. The officers laughed. It had the sound of the start of a long laugh that they intended to savor in the face of my helplessness. It didn't last as long as they had hoped. By the time they started to advance on me again, I had my lighter out and lit. I feared that I might need a way to defend myself against something less, or perhaps more than human, when I saw how aggressively they were following me. Once again, I sprayed the hairspray, this time over the flame. I was equally shocked, surprised, pleased, horrified when the stream of fire hit the face of the nearest officer, still wet with my attempt to blind it. And all of their faces burst into flame. I didn't stick around to see how long it would stop them. I ran. I ignored the pain in my body and ran with no particular destination in mind. Sometimes in the midst of terror, your mind can pick up on and retain the strangest details. As I was fleeing, I ran past a playground. Deputy Howard was there, smiling and playing basketball with a group of children. I wandered Haven for hours. I stopped long enough to do my last recording as I gave myself a brief examination. I didn't want to spend too long in one place while the sun was up. As far as I could tell, I wasn't hurt too badly. But I knew with the adrenaline rush it might take some time to feel any injuries fully. To be completely truthful, that stop was more to process what had happened. Once the sun went down, I stopped for longer. On my wanderings, I found a tent city just outside of downtown Haven. I hadn't walked this way in any of my wanderings, but I thought it wouldn't be wise to stick with familiar patterns. I asked one of the residents of this tent city if I could buy an extra hoodie if he had one. Thankfully, he did. I gave him the rest of the cash that I had in my pocket. The hoodie was too big for me, but that's probably better for my purposes. I headed back to my apartment building and didn't see any cruisers. I knew that didn't mean that they weren't there, but I was hopeful. Keeping my head down, I walked into the lobby. "Hey!" yelled the doorman. "Get out of here! If you don't get out of here, I'll call the police!" I stood there for a moment, considering pulling off the hood and letting him see my face when he said, "They're already up on the 4th floor and they look pissed. I'm sure they could spare an officer, and I wouldn't want to be you when they got down here." I left. It looks like I won't be going home. I was just starting to get comfortable there. I don't think I realized how much of a comfort it was having somewhere to be. I headed back to the tent city. When I settled down, a few people looked at me suspiciously, but no one said anything. I left my phone, all of my supplies for my adventures, most of my cash, and the journal in the apartment. Surprisingly, the loss of the journal is almost as bad as the loss of my apartment. The journal was tangible proof that I existed before 2 weeks ago. I have no identity or past, and today it seems that I have also lost my home, the only thing that was guiding me and giving me purpose, and the only means to contact the only person who knows who I am. I should try to sleep. I don't know what I'll do tomorrow.
That was The Peril of Haven, written and directed by Antoine Martinez-Jones, performed by Benji Diver, and music, as always, by Kanako Neal. Make sure to follow us on social media, subscribe, rate and review us on your podcast player of choice, and don't forget, smile.